On the line with us today, we have Monsignor Paul L. Bochicchio. We're going to be discussing his amazing book, Along the Way, A Priest's Journey of Joys and Challenges. Available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And people, listen, if you want to gather everything that Monsignor has to offer, you know what you got to do. Amazon, Barnes & Noble is where you have to go. And if you or someone you know has a book that they'd like moved, well, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give and contact Stellar Literary to move it for you, because that is who brought Monsignor here to our desk today. And you can find out more information on them and their fantastic team at stellarliterary.com. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have him here on the line with us. Now, the moment you go to his Amazon page, his Barnes & Noble page, you start to do any research on his book, you understand that what we're discussing today is a memoir. Okay, so we're going to be learning from his journey, his path, a lot of the adversity that he faced, and right there in the title, about those joys and challenges, right? And we know that when you get to a certain age in life, you understand adversity is just part of the game. As much as we would like to avoid it in the moment, taking away all of the lessons that are learned from it, of course, in the moment you want to avoid them, right? You don't want to actually go through it. But we're going to learn from his challenges that he went through, some of the lessons that he learned. And through that education, you're going to be able to take that wisdom and implement it into your day-to-day lives. And I'm really looking forward to this. And at the end of the day, it's his life, it's his journey, it's his experience. So he's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. Monsignor, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction. And thank you very much for being a guest with us today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Ben.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Listen, man, we're very much looking forward to this. It's a pleasure to have you as a guest. I often love having memoirs because, again, we know the old cliche, right? The adversity that you go through equates to experience. That experience equates to wisdom, right? But I love when I have authors that have written memoirs because then it's your experience that I'm able to learn from. And I may not have to make the same mistake myself. So I'm really looking forward to the words of wisdom. So without further ado, Monsignor, let's jump right in. Along the Way, A Priest's Journey of Joys and Challenges. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Well, the book, as you pointed out, is really the result of over 50 years of priesthood, and it was an opportunity for me to reflect, on all the things that happened, along the way. Thereby the title, and it reflected for me a perspective that I think time and age gives you. In many ways, it pointed out to me that all that I anticipated in terms of my journey turned out to be much better than I expected when I started, or at least different than I expected.
Monsignor, that brings up a great point, because when you're talking about what it sounds like to me, that last part that you just finished with, you're talking about perception. And I think oftentimes when we are going through moments of adversity or challenges, how often we can think that the situation is worse than it actually is. Can you elaborate on that thought process a little bit more, please?
Yes. As I wrote the book, and I really wrote most of it from memory, many things came to the surface, and I began to look back and saw patterns in my life, certain weaknesses that became strengths when they were channeled in the proper way, challenges that ended up being wonderful opportunities for growth. The book has a number of essays, and one of the essays is entitled Loaves and Fishes, and is based on the scriptural passage of Jesus multiplying the loaves and fishes. And what I use it as an opportunity to say that something that's a major theme in my book, that efforts belong to us, results belong to God. And sometimes we only see limited results for our efforts, but God sees the bigger picture. And in that particular essay, I give a number of examples of how that has played out in my life and in my ministry.
I love that. Monsignor, next question that I want to go into. Let's talk about the concept of inspiration, because I think what you've embarked upon here is profound, and I love it. And I'm very glad that you put the book out. But, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. You didn't have to. I mean, this very easily could have been something that stayed on your personal shelf, or something that you preached about and verbally told those, right? These lessons that you had picked up. But you didn't stop there. You put the book together and you put it out for the public to now be able to partake in as well. What inspired you to do that? What were you seeing based upon the words that you were putting on the page that made you feel this would be beneficial to your readers?
Well, I always consider myself somewhat of a storyteller, and I think it kind of goes with my vocation. You know, very often you're using illustrations in your homilies or in some sort of pastoral counseling or spiritual direction. Right. Anecdotal episodes that help people to relate to a deeper truth. And in the introduction to my book, I mentioned the fact that I was inspired by someone like Michelangelo, who used to look at a block of marble and see David in the marble and say, I have to release David from that marble. And I kind of looked at the experience of my priesthood and saying, there are stories to be told that need to be released, as it were. Mm-hmm. And the secondary reason was that I felt that everyone has stories. Sometimes we don't realize the power of our own stories. And I wanted my book to be an inspiration to people so that they would tell their own stories. I had priests and seminarians in mind, but not only, because I think the general public could relate very well to that concept of storytelling and reflecting on their own stories and challenges.
Absolutely. Follow-up question, sticking with the concept of inspiration, but now stepping back and broadening it a bit. You categorize yourself as a storyteller, or at least you've always felt that you were a storyteller. And of course, given the career path that you've chosen, a lot of that is storytelling, right? And that you do and you embark upon. Now, when it comes to writing, was writing a hobby of yours growing up? Was this something that you always found yourself doing? Were there writers or other artists that inspired you? Talk to us a little bit more about the love for creative writing.
I remember a friend of mine. I was sharing some things that I had written as reflections in a journal, and he kept saying to me, "You ought to really publish that." He said, "Because you have insight." And as I began to read over some of my journals, which recorded some of these experiences, mm-hmm. I began to say, if for no other reason, is that there were lessons learned and lessons to be taught.
Love that. Love that. People, again, we're here on the line with Monsignor Paul L. Bochicchio. We're discussing his amazing book, Along the Way, A Priest's Journey of Joys and Challenges, available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. Monsignor, next question that I'd love to get into, and a great segue that you've established, because your final answer, you were talking about lessons that you had incorporated and lessons that you learned along your journey. Well, I want to take a second, as if my listening audience needs any more of an incentive. I want to take a second. I know your book is littered with, as you said, essays that have lessons to be learned there. Well, if we can go over maybe one or two of those lessons that you encompass in the book, for anybody that is going through their own adversity right now and is really struggling on finding a way to get through it, what are some words of wisdom that you can help them with right now?
Well, part of it comes just from the autobiographical element of the book, which basically is sort of an analysis of my journey, mm-hmm. Not only my early life, but my ministry, where I found many lessons learned. And then I went to a section called Pastoral Vignettes, which were incidents, many of them very funny incidents that taught lessons to me and hopefully to the people who were involved. But in the essay section, one of my most powerful essays, I believe, is one entitled In Medio Stat Virtus, which is Latin for in the middle stands virtue. And it kind of describes my life and my approach to life, particularly in an age when we are so polarized on everything, in politics, religion, and you name it, in our culture, that I had this sense that we need to find an authentic middle ground. We need to be able to learn from the wisdom and the truth that are on both sides of the spectrum. And I gave my own experience of seeing that throughout the years. And that was one. Another, I think, would be what I already mentioned, loaves and fishes, that basically that need to be satisfied in our lives with our best effort. That God doesn't expect anything more from us than to do our best.
Right.
Sometimes people can have the attitude of let God do it, and God says, no, we're in this together. I need your 5 loaves and 2 fish in order to be able to accomplish my work. And so essays along those lines, kind of sum up my philosophy of life.
Mm-hmm.
I had another essay which, kind of speaks to some contemporary issues, and the question, and it was like, who is right? And it tried to analyze the whole spectrum of certain issues. Are we looking at things in a balanced way or aren't we?
Mm.
And then some lighter things, like I did an essay on 2 pets that I had, a cat and dog, and what that cat and dog taught me about life and even my own relationship with God by my relationship with them. So that was the kind of wisdom that I tried to unfold in the essays and through the pastoral vignettes that, kind of captured the comedy and the tragedy of life.
Absolutely. Listen, Monsignor, the spectrum of conversations that one can have when they pick up your book is fascinating. I love that. Again, from the divide that we have in current society to the purity of animals and what they can teach us. That is fantastic. People, I'm telling you, you're going to want to run to his Amazon and Barnes & Noble pages and pick up this book. You surely will not be disappointed. Monsignor, as we start to close out of this fantastic interview, last few questions here. What would you say was a highlight for you in writing the book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't anticipating before you began on it?
I guess what surprised me were the number of blessings that I had taken for granted. As I began to unfold the stories that are in the book, I began to realize, something that I always believed, that my seminary formation was only part of my formation. That actually getting out and ministering to people, and not only ministering to them, but allowing them to minister to me, with their joys and their sorrows, their struggles and their crises and their moments of insight proved to be, very powerful blessings in my life.
Monsignor, that is incredible to hear you say that. I think at least from my let me just speak from my own experience. From my perspective, to hear someone in your position say that, listen, I don't have all the answers. I myself have taken blessings for granted. I can learn through others to actually help me and benefit my journey. I think that is something that is so commendable. And I think, again, speaking from my own experience, and I don't have a direct priest or anybody that I can point to and be like, yeah, this one acted as if he always had all the answers. But I know my time in going to church and going to mass, and I think it's probably safe to assume, I think from our perspective, we always look at the pastor or the deacon or whoever is leading that particular group as having all the answers, right? As being that guiding force. And I think that it offers so much peace and serenity to hear you say it's actually the opposite. I don't have it all. There are mistakes that I have done or things that I have not taken full advantage of. There is something that is so humbling about that. And I love the fact that you took it there. And thank you very much for articulating that. What's next for you, man? I mean, this book is wonderful. This book is fantastic, and I can only hope that there's more on the horizon. Please, Monsignor, what's upcoming?
Well, I have started a second book. I began to realize as I started to unfold what I called pastoral vignettes, little stories that, came along the way. Mm-hmm. I realized the more I reflected, there were many more stories. And so in a second book, I envisioned the second book to be called Along the Way To, and the subtitle Lessons Learned and Lessons Taught. And I also am doing some spiritual reflections in the book, trying to apply, certain, religious seasons of the year to the practical day-to-day life. So to offer something that may look to be, something right out of scripture or right out of prayer, and then show how it relates to our experience of day-to-day life.
There you have it. There you have it. Last question here, Monsignor. Being an artist myself, I love having this platform to be able to utilize and pay it forward, in a sense, to other artists out there listening in. Now, in this instance, for other writers, you're someone that has been through the process. You've written the book, but you also gotten the book published, and that is another journey and a challenge all in itself, right?
Yeah.
In addition to that, you have another book that's getting ready to be released very shortly, which we cannot wait for. I want to take this opportunity, though, for any new writers out there listening in, someone just starting out. What are some words of wisdom that you can offer to help them become more aware about the journey they're getting ready to embark upon?
I would say trust your creativity and your imagination. Sometimes we take it for granted, and sometimes we think that it's something that only applies to ourselves. But I think when we begin to write, even when we begin to speak, we realize that we have something to offer others. And I think we always have to keep that goal in mind that, just like an artist would be compelled to put something on canvas, or a sculptor like Michelangelo be compelled to release a figure from a block of marble. I think all of us have that creativity. All of us have something to say. Where each one of us is unique, right down to our DNA and our fingerprints. And from a spiritual perspective, God made each of us as a unique person with a unique message. And I think that part of our journey is to share that message in whatever way we can. And if one is inspired to write, then that's the way that God wants you to convey that message.
There you have it. Listen, people, I couldn't have planned it better myself. I mean, that final note is really a mission statement for our network, People of Distinction. I've said this multiple times in the past. We truly believe here through People of Distinction, every individual person has their own distinct voice. Everyone has their own story. And we want to be able to utilize this platform as a microphone to showcase that what he's talking about here is advice for writers, but that's really for everyone. That can be applied to anyone, regardless of background. I absolutely love it. Listen, I could talk to him for hours, okay? The information is that extensive, and it's something that is that intriguing. But for the sake of the interview, I'm not going to do that, okay? Amazon, Barnes & Noble are where you have to go. Along the Way is the title you have to pick up, and Monsignor Paul L. Bochicchio is the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table. You surely will not be disappointed. A fantastic book to add to your shelf, an even better gift to add to someone else's. So head on over there today and pick up your copy. Monsignor, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. I truly mean that. Thank you once again for being a guest